My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, and that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins and the grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. When I used to live in Rome, I would sometimes help out in work of translation, both in writing and also simultaneous translation for conferences. Since I knew Spanish and also Italian, I would sometimes help out to do translations from those languages into English. And I remember once I was a little nervous because it was one of my first time doing simultaneous translation, and I was going with a team of other translators to help out in a conference in Rome. And when we pulled up at the hotel where this conference was being hosted, we walked in and we presented ourselves as the translators, and the person at the front desk said in Italian, "Traduttore, traditore," which is Italian for translator, traitor. And that's a pretty common quip, that the translator, if he's not careful, can be a kind of traitor because he can twist the original intention in the translation that he makes, right? That it's not faithful to the original. We also have the famous phrase, lost in translation, because sometimes this can happen too, that the original intent of the writer or the speaker is lost through a misinterpretation or through a poor translation or simply through misunderstanding. Jesus, in your life, you didn't have any simultaneous translators, or the disciples weren't dedicated to translating you to other languages. But isn't it true that so often in your teaching, especially in your parables, people didn't get it, right? They didn't understand, or they got lost, or they misinterpreted you. And maybe we feel the same way sometimes when we speak with other people. We can be saying one thing, and they can be understanding something else. It's like when you're talking on two different wavelengths, even though you're speaking the same language, it's like it's not resonating. They're not getting it. They're not making sense of it. Jesus, when you speak about your passion, this happens a lot. Several times in the Gospels, we see how you're trying to prepare the apostles, the disciples, for what's going to come, what's going to happen in Jerusalem, your impending death on the cross. But every time you bring it up, they don't get it. You get lost in translation. We read at the beginning of today's Gospel, as Jesus was going up to Jerusalem, he took the 12 disciples aside by themselves, and he said to them on the way, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be handed over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and hand him over to the Gentiles to be mocked and scourged and crucified, and he will be raised up on the third day." This prophecy of the Passion is something that you bring up on several occasions, Jesus, and it seems like every time it falls on deaf ears. In one instance, we read how they say they did not understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to ask him. In another moment, Matthew says, when they hear this, they were greatly distressed. The impression is that the apostles don't understand or speak your language, Jesus, the language of the cross. In today's gospel, this happens with the mother of James and John, who tradition tells us is Salome, the wife of Zebedee, Mrs. Zebedee, we could say, the mother of the sons of thunder. As soon as you make this prophecy about your passion, which is pretty negative and sobering, the mother of James and John marches right up to you. And she says, we can read, the mother of the sons of Zebedee approached Jesus with her sons and did him homage, wishing to ask him for something. He said to her, "What do you wish?" She answered him, "Command that these sons of mine sit, one at your right and the other at your left, in your kingdom." Jesus said in reply, "You do not know what you are asking." And then, Jesus, you make this second attempt to introduce her into the language of the cross. You tried already, and they're clearly not listening to you. Do you wish to drink the cup? Are you able to drink the cup that I am to drink? And they say, Possumus, we can. We know, Lord, that this cup is a cup of sacrifice, the chalice of your suffering. And you're inviting the apostles to participate in this, to understand this new way of thinking, this new language of the cross. But do they really get it? Jesus, we can hear you saying to each one of us, are you sure you really want to follow me? Are you truly willing to drink from my chalice, the chalice of my fate? And they say, Possumus, we can. And so then, Lord, you're telling each one of us, okay, if you can, lay yourself down. Lay down your life for the sheep, as I will do. Place yourself at the service of others in joyful sacrifice. Lord, teach me this language of the cross. Teach me to take up the cross and follow you, which means killing off my own selfishness, my own laziness, my tendency to seek comfort. You know, there's a wonderful anecdote I heard about two young boys in Seville, in the southern part of Spain. And as you may know, Seville in the summertime can get extremely hot. So you can imagine these two boys were gypsies. They were kind of nomads. Their family didn't really have a stable home. And their parents would send them out each day to ask for money on the street. And so these two boys, one was about 12, the other was about 8. They're there on a blazing hot summer afternoon in Seville trying to ask for money. But at that time of the day, everybody's inside waiting out the worst part of the heat of the day. And the older boy realizes that the younger boy is really suffering from dehydration. He hasn't had enough to drink. And so he starts to get worried for his younger brother. Well, along comes a woman who takes pity on them and gives them a jar of cold milk. And so the older boy realizes that there's really not enough for both of them. And so he turns to his younger brother and he says, let's play a game. In order for this gift that we have received to enjoy it as much as we can, we'll take turns taking sips. You take a sip, then I'll take a sip. You take a sip, and I'll take a sip. And we'll let this, we can kind of tease this out for as long as we can and enjoy this. And so they began the game. But really, in reality, as they were passing the jar back and forth, this pitcher of milk, the older boy was faking it. He wasn't actually drinking hardly anything. And he allowed his younger brother to basically consume the entire, we could say, gallon of milk, to allow his younger brother to regain his strength, to be rehydrated. And the older brother hardly drank a thing, even though he was also very thirsty. What an incredible example of self-sacrifice for the sake of another. That is the language of the cross. And that's what Jesus is inviting Mrs. Zebedee and her sons to learn. They're going to learn it with time. But it seems that in this moment, leading up to the Passion, they're still not getting it. It's getting lost in translation. We know, of course, that fast forwarding to the moment of our Lord's Passion on the cross, at least John and his mother Salome are there at the foot of the cross. They've managed to understand enough of this language to be there and suffer with our Lord. Of course, perhaps that is because Mary has helped them. If we want to know the language of the cross, if we want to be steeped in this way of thinking, in this mentality of joyful self-sacrifice for the sake of others, let's ask Our Lady to give us this knowledge. She who stood at the foot of the cross can be a good guide for us in these weeks of Lent as we prepare for the great mystery of our Lord's suffering on the cross. I thank you, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me in this meditation. I ask your help in putting them into effect. My Immaculate Mother, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.